Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salai Makudere. It's time for our hashtag Heard on Air feature. If you're new to the show and you're not a regular listener, well, this is a part of the show where we reflect back on the brilliant interviews that we have here on Salam Media. If you missed them, you're on the move, you're on the run, going about your business. There was a really, really wonderful interview that Inaid Wadi had last night on Wednesday nights with Inaid Wadi, our sister show. And it was a conversation essentially putting Cuba or placing Cuba at the center of the conversation and linking the US pressure on Havana to what we're currently seeing all across the world, whether it's in Venezuela, whether it's in Iran, and different parts of the country. And Inaid Wadi had a really, really wonderful conversation. He was talking to Yusuf Kadwa of Palestine BDS and Banganayi, Deputy General Secretary of Friends of Cuba Society. And he's also been in Cuba. He's trained as an engineer in Cuba. So he has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the ins and outs of that country. And it was a really, I think, insightful conversation. We don't speak about Cuba enough, but you can tell from the movements and the rhetoric of the United States of America that Cuba is going to be their next front. That's where they're going to be looking out next to try and, I don't know, quench their thirst for oil or for just world global dominance. So if you missed that conversation, take a listen.
As you're saying, I also echoing what Yusuf is saying, that the Americans have been on Cuba's case for more than 65 years now. Since Cuba got its independence in 1959, in 1961, we saw them sending some mercenary, which we just celebrated now a few days ago, the Battle of Playa Iron, which is now known as Bay of Pigs, where the Americans sent their first mercenary to go and try and overthrow the Cuban government, and they were defeated then. And since then, they then put on a number of and series of sanctions or blockade, economic blockade on Cuba, trying in all means to try and stifle their economy and stifle the livelihood of the people. But during the Cold War, we know that during that time when Soviet Union was still there and the Eastern Bloc of socialist republics was still intact, it was much easier for Cuba to do trade with those countries. But when it came to at the late 80s, early 90s, when the Soviet Union disintegrated and this Eastern Bloc also disintegrated, Cuba lost about more than 80% of its trade. And then they went into a same situation like they're having now, which they called special period. That's the time that we arrived in Cuba in 1991. And we're a group of us from Africa, quite a number. I think in the Island of Youth, where we started, we're more than 13,000 African young African people who were being trained by Cubans. And one thing that they told us, that they were not going to take us back to our countries because of the economic problems that they had. We were going to be trained, and they were going to adjust to the economic situation that was there in Cuba until we finish our degrees. And most of us finished, and we came back into different African countries, which include Angola, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Ethiopia, and many other countries in Africa, where they trained young Africans, and these Africans are now giving back to their countries. The impact of the blockade currently now is affecting the Cubans so badly, because now it affects the transport of goods, the public transport, the buses, the taxis can't get fuel. So there's a lot of rationing to try and make sure that the Cuban can provide that health and education to their people. So it's affecting the production of electricity. That means they've got more than 18 hours of blackouts, which we used to have here, different stages. So they are also going through the same stages of electrical blackouts. That means that there are hospitals, there are schools, there are old age homes can't function properly. And you can see this is, like you said, you are trying to stifle the livelihood of people. They are trying to make sure that the Cubans suffer, and then the people can go into the street and protest against their government because of this economic hardship that they are having.
Well, certainly, in fact, I think, this seems to be the modus operandi, clever, of the United States of America, is to create chaos in the country and hope that there is going to be regime change. They tried exactly the same in Iran as well. In the case of Venezuela, Maduro was actually kidnapped and taken away as well. So these are the excuses that they use. They use regime change as an excuse to take over a country. But Yusuf, just coming back, and I see Adolf has actually sent us, and what Clever is saying, he's saying my network is very bad due to electricity cuts here. So, unfortunately, he can't join us. So this is the problem that they are faced with. But just coming to your involvement, Yusuf, now, I think, when you sent me the message this morning and you asked me the question, have you guys done any programs on the Cuban situation? Sadly, even our mainstream media is not touching on the subject and have got to grips or come to terms with the dire situation that Cubans find themselves in. We spoke about the strong relationship that Fidel Castro and Cuba has had with South Africa. There's been cooperation that is going back for decades at this point in time. But what you also mentioned is, you are working with people. You are working with the plan is to work with the Brazilian, with the Cuban ambassadors as well. There are a few individuals, there are a few doctors, that obviously have expressed concern as well. You spoke about, I think, there's a Dr. Norman Maharaj. If I'm not talking about missing, if I'm correct, I think Brian Williams, I know he's busy at this point in time behind the scenes talking. So there are individuals in this country that have expressed grave concerns and are trying to do something about the situation.
Correct. Yes. I think the thing that people need to understand is the debt that South Africa owes to Cuba is a life debt. They provided troops to fight in Angola against our anti-apartheid government, right? And I think across the liberation struggles through Africa that Cuba supported, they must have lost. Can't remember the exact figure, but it's probably at least 50 to 60,000 Cubans that died fighting for us. It's our duty to stand up for them. It's as simple as that, you know. And Cuban government sent us a list of desperately needed medications. When we priced that medication in South Africa, the cost was so prohibitive. It was probably coming close to over R500,000. Luckily, because the Brazilian government has a huge generic pharmaceutical industry, we managed to get the Cuban ambassador to speak to the Brazilian ambassador, who has now donated those pharmaceuticals. We do know as well from the time we received that list to now, they're already being depleted. And so I've asked people like Adolf, who's the medical student, to reach out to all the hospitals and do another stock take and tell us what else do we need, because we know that Mexico and Panama also have a very large generic pharmaceutical industry. The problem also happens is how do we get it from Brazil and other countries to Cuba, because the siege has started. Transportation on the normal courier system is very difficult at the moment because internationally the petrol price hikes have thrown standard transport courier out of the roof, number one. And then there are also certain courier companies that are based in the US. And we know that people have tried to send it via them. But when the goods get to the warehouses in the US is not releasing it to send it to Cuba. So for instance, our South African medical students normally receive care packages every 2 and 3 months. So at the moment, the female students, our medical students in Cuba are saying, please send us sanitary pads, send us tampons. We're not getting any of these. So it's our duty as well to stand up for our own South Africans who will come back and work in our hospitals. Right. So we need to stand up for them. Simple as that.
Yes, Yusuf. I see Adolf has actually joined us as well. I'm hoping, Adolf can hear us. Adolf, good evening to you and welcome. If you could unmute your mic, please, Adolf. Well, Adobe certainly seems to be having a problem. Unfortunately, and we can understand because, Clever, it would be quite interesting to understand from the South African students that are studying out in Cuba. And at this point in time, I think, with Yusuf mentioning networking with the students and also looking at Mexico, looking at some of the other countries in terms of, combining the efforts. But just looking at it from the Friends of Cuba Society as well, in terms of what you are able to do, Clever.
So thank you very much. I think what actually happened at the beginning when Professor Brian Williams came to us with the idea of this Cuba Solidarity Now network, which is now a very big group of WhatsApp group that has been formed, that all of us, a lot of people have joined. I think it's got about more than 700 people in the group. Most of them are veterans that were outside the country. Some have been in the struggle for the independence of South Africa, and some have been ministers and so on. So quite a number of people are in this group, including our comrade Ronnie Casril, who is quite active in the group. So what we suggested is that we form a special purpose vehicle where we can open up a bank account, which is now spread to most people. And this bank account is the one that now we are using as a vehicle to ask people to come and donate money, deposit money into this account. And then this is the money that I think Yusuf is talking about, that we're now using the same of these resources to try and buy medications, try and buy some few things like solar panels and so on, so that we can send to Cuba and then make an impact and try and reduce this impact of the blockade that has been put on Cuba. So on our side, mostly we are mobilizing people to join this group. We will do other activities as Friends of Cuba Society that we usually do all the years, that is sending messages of solidarity and protesting at the Cuban, at these American embassies throughout the country and the consulate. We'll all continue doing that. Also coordinating our work with the different trade unions that are friendly to Cuba. For example, all the unions that are in COSATU, that are doing quite a lot of work with that, and many other progressive organizations, people in the coordinating also with people in the solidarity with Palestine. Now also a lot of people in solidarity with Iran and many other countries, solidarity with Venezuela, that are coming together to try and fight this imperialist action of the United States and Israel. As you have said, the failures of the United States government and its CIA and its all this terrorist military in Iran has made them to try and find a scapegoat, and the next target will be Cuba. As Yusuf has also said, this is not the first time that the Cubans have come to Africa have been coming to Africa to help. And since 1976, when the South African Defense Force invaded Angola, the Cubans were there and defended Angolans people. And after that, they came back again in the mid-80s, and the Cubans sent quite a number of its soldiers who volunteered to come and fight. And this is when the impact of that war in the Battle of Cuito Canavale, when the South African Defense Force was defeated, and then it led into the independence of Namibia and the release of Comrade Nelson Mandela from prison. And that's the new dispensation that came into South Africa. So us as South Africans, as Africans, we owe quite a lot to Cuba. It is the right time that we mobilize our government, mobilize all the people that love peace to contribute into this account that we have, so that we can have this necessary special medication that is needed by Cuba because of the blockade that has been imposed on them. Cuba cannot be able to buy anything from any country that cannot be confiscated by the United States.
Well, certainly clever. And also, I think, Yusuf, what is also important to understand is Clever speaks about the Cuba Solidarity Now campaign. And I'm sure that the Cuban ambassador very, very actively involved from the communication that you sent me, where the ambassadors identified some of the projects and what is a priority at this point in time in terms of what will immediately benefit the people of Cuba. Now, if I recall when the Russian invasion of Ukraine had taken place, we had the entire Europe and the Western world rallying behind Ukraine, taking in their refugees, support that was going through to the Ukraine as well. And it's now time where Cuba has actually played its part in the past. Clever spoke about Africa. Africa owes a huge debt to Cuba as well. And it is time for the global South to actually stand up to assist Cuba in their time of need. I recall talking to the Ukrainian ambassador when Russia had attacked Ukraine. And at that point in time, even from within South Africa, we had relief organizations that rallied behind to even provide assistance to Ukraine at this point in time. And the question is, why can it not be done? I mean, it's a good thing. The unions are involved, the likes of COSATU are involved, but also in terms of government involvement and also our relief organizations within South Africa who need to come forward and step up.
Definitely, most definitely. I encourage people, go onto YouTube, Mandela Castro. Just listen to what Mandela said. The debt that we owe them, number one, And you are right. The problem that Cuba has is they export doctors and they're not exporting oil and diamonds. So for many countries in the world, they'll just shun them. Whereas they have done more for third world countries than probably any first world country has done. They've been the backbone of healthcare in so many countries. And we owe them a debt that is so huge. And it's our turn to stand up. It's as simple as that.
Yes,
one of
yeah,
the other
exactly.
areas, one of the other areas they asked us to help out as well is, besides the pharmaceuticals, they need solar panels. Because remember when we had load shedding, right? At our hospitals, we had generators, but we were able to add petrol and diesel to run them. They don't have that. So we're trying to help them to transition those points to solar panels so that they'll be able to power their ICUs, their ventilators, their oxygen machines. If they don't have those things, people have died when the blackout first hit. We can't allow that. That needs to stop. So we need people to actively, yes, Palestine is a very important freedom struggle, but Cuba is as well. So we need people to donate money so the solar panels are crucial. So getting funding in for that is very important as well.